The date is August 26, 1991, and the venue is Madison Square Garden in New York City. The event is SummerSlam, and the atmosphere is electric, charged with the manic energy that only professional wrestling can generate. On one side, you have the reigning tag team champions, the rough-and-tumble, unhinged Nasty Boys. On the other, two men who seem to have walked straight out of a post-apocalyptic nightmare, their faces adorned with stark, menacing face paint and their shoulders bristling with lethal-looking spikes. They are the Legion of Doom, Hawk and Animal. They are not just wrestlers, they are forces of nature, a living, breathing testament to brutality and dominance. In a no-disqualification street fight, a match perfectly suited to their savage style, they dismantle their opponents. It's a maelstrom of destruction, but the outcome is never in doubt. With a final held high, they solidify their status as the most legendary tag team to ever step inside a squared circle. They are the only team to have held the Tag Team Championships across the three most prominent promotions of the era. Their myth is now fact, their legend cemented in the annals of history. For years, the duo had been an unstoppable freight train, a spectacle of power and intimidation. Their arrival in the Federation had been a seismic event, a jolt of raw adrenaline that thrilled fans and terrified their opponents. The company had built them up as an indomitable machine, a tag team of unmatched ferocity and charisma. Their entrance, a high-octane procession to the thundering rhythm of What a Rush, was a work of art. The spiked shoulder pads, the face paint, the visceral intensity, it all combined to create an aura of invincibility. It seemed as though nothing could stop them. They were at the absolute apex of their profession, the kings of the mountain, the last of a dying breed of legitimate tough guys. Yet just over a year later, after all the fanfare and all the build-up, it would all fall apart. The Legion of Doom, the most dominant tag team in wrestling history, would be gone from the company, seemingly vanished into thin air. The question looms, a dark, unsettling whisper in the collective memory of wrestling fans. What happened? How could a team so successful, so popular, and so seemingly untouchable simply disappear? What series of events could lead to such a dramatic, sudden end? To understand the fall, we must first look at the rise, a story that began long before they ever set foot in the World Wrestling Federation. The story of the Road Warriors begins in 1983, not as the Legion of Doom, but as a team managed by the legendary Precious Paul Ellering. Recognizing the raw, untamed power of two imposing young wrestlers, Joseph Laurinaitis and Michael Hegstrand, Ellering molded them into a living embodiment of the post-apocalyptic world of Mad Max. They were a synthesis of power and punk rock aesthetic, a new kind of wrestling gimmick that would revolutionize the industry. They weren't just characters, they were a subculture. Their high-impact, stiff-as-nails wrestling style and intimidating presence quickly made them a sensation in Georgia Championship Wrestling. They were an anomaly, a pair of green wrestlers who bypassed the traditional paying dues period because their on-screen presence was so believable. They didn't just win matches, they obliterated their opponents. From Georgia, they moved on to the American Wrestling Association, a major player in the wrestling world at the time. Their reputation preceded them, and on August 25, 1984, they captured the World Tag Team Championship. The promotion's top draw throughout 1984 and 1985, they were heels who were so compelling, so awe-inspiring, that the fans couldn't help but cheer for them. Their entrance music, a rearranged version of Black Sabbath's Iron Man, became their battle cry. But their legend was truly forged in Jim Crockett Promotions, which would later become World Championship Wrestling. This is where they became the undisputed kings of the tag team division. Their feuds were epic, marked by a level of violence and intensity rarely seen before. They tore through opponents with a primal fury, culminating in iconic matches like the scaffold match against the Midnight Express at Starrcade '86 and the first ever War Games match against the Four Horsemen. They were the muscle behind a crusade against the establishment, a symbol of rebellion for the common man against the polished aristocratic villains. They were two-time six-man tag team champions, and on October 29, 1988, they finally captured the Tag Team Championship. The Road Warriors' time here was a masterclass in how to build a dominant, larger-than-life presence. They were treated as an unstoppable force, a duo who could destroy any opponent and win any match. Their last big victory in WCW came at Starrcade 1989, where they won the Iron Man Tag Team Tournament, a testament to their unwavering dominance. By the time they left the company in June 1990, a new stage was calling. A bigger platform that would transform their careers and expose their legend to an even wider audience. Their arrival in the World Wrestling Federation in the summer of 1990 was heralded with a tremendous amount of anticipation. Vince McMahon, ever the showman, understood the star power of the duo. He rebranded them, dropping the Road Warriors moniker to avoid confusion with the Ultimate Warrior, and officially christened them as the Legion of Doom. Their debut on Wrestling Challenge on July 15, 1990, was a statement of intent. They were presented as the ultimate threat, a team so powerful they made even the Federation's other top teams seem tame by comparison. They immediately entered a high-profile feud with Demolition, a team that had long been accused of being a pale imitation of the Road Warriors. The feud was a clash of titans, but the intensity was somewhat muted due to Demolition's internal changes. Nonetheless, the Legion of Doom continued their march of destruction. They were a cornerstone of the tag team division, their high-impact offense and undeniable star power making them a must-see act. Their defining moment came at the aforementioned SummerSlam 1991, a victory that cemented their place in wrestling history. They were now the only team to have held the tag team titles in the three major promotions. The feeling was that their run with the titles would be a long and prosperous one. They held the championships for 6 months before dropping them to Money Inc. on February 7, 1992. The loss was a minor setback, but it seemed to be a temporary one. They were still the Legion of Doom, and they were still the most formidable force in the company. After a brief hiatus, they returned at WrestleMania 8 with their original manager, Paul Ellering, back at their side. Although they weren't featured on the card due to Hawk being under suspension, the reunion was still a cause for celebration. It seemed as though the classic, unassailable version of the Legion of Doom was back and ready to reclaim their place at the top. But this is where the story takes a dark and bizarre turn, a narrative twist so illogical and ill-conceived that it would ultimately lead to their demise. The team was presented with a new gimmick, a creative decision so bewildering that it still baffles fans to this day. They were given a ventriloquist dummy named Rocco. The idea was that this wooden figure would be their inspiration. The gimmick was a disaster from the start. Originally introduced as Freckles at a live television taping, the segment bombed so badly that it never even made it to air. Yet, for some inexplicable reason, the company persisted. The sight of two of the toughest men in professional wrestling, two legendary monsters of the mat, carrying around a puppet and talking to it, was absurd. It was a complete and utter contradiction of everything the Legion of Doom stood for. They were supposed to be unyielding forces of nature, not comic relief. This bizarre and demeaning gimmick stripped them of their mystique, their intimidation, and their aura of invincibility. The end came swiftly. On August 29, 1992, at SummerSlam in Wembley Stadium, in front of close to 80,000 screaming fans, the Legion of Doom made a grand entrance on motorcycles. It was a moment that should have been a triumph, a spectacle of their mythical personas. But behind the scenes, the frustration with the Rocco gimmick had reached a boiling point. Immediately after the event, Hawk, in a moment of sheer disgust and disillusionment, left the company. He had had enough. The man who had faced down giants and stared into the heart of madness with a look of pure menace could not, in good conscience, continue to carry a puppet to the ring. He went AWOL in London, missing his flight back to the United States and effectively severing his ties with the Federation. Animal, ever the consummate professional, remained to fulfill his contractual obligations. He briefly teamed with former Demolition member Crush before a back injury forced him into a lengthy hiatus, bringing a definitive end to the Legion of Doom's run in the company. The demise of the Legion of Doom in the Federation was not caused by a rival team or a devastating injury. It was a creative decision, a baffling gimmick that undermined their entire legacy. The company, in its infinite wisdom, had tried to make them into something they were not. They were stripped of their identity, their toughness, and their credibility, all for a puppet that served no purpose other than to embarrass them. After their departure, Hawk and Animal went their separate ways for a time. Hawk found success in New Japan Pro Wrestling as part of the Hellraisers with Kensuke Sasaki. a wrestler who adopted the Power Warrior gimmick to team with Hawk. Animal, after recovering from his injury, returned to the ring, and the Road Warriors reunited in World Championship Wrestling in 1996, though their run was short-lived. They would return to the Federation in 1997, a welcome sight for fans who remembered their glory days. They were heavily involved in the classic feud with the Hart Foundation, and on October 13, 1997, they recaptured the Tag Team Championship, a moment that felt like redemption. But their second run was also marked by creative missteps. They lost the titles to the New Age Outlaws and were then subjected to a storyline that played off Hawk's real-life struggles with addiction. The low point came when Hawk was deemed unfit to wrestle and a new member, Droz, was introduced, culminating in a shocking but controversial segment where Hawk faked a suicide jump off the Titantron. The angle was widely condemned and ultimately dropped. The Legion of Doom's story is a tragic one, not because of a lack of talent or passion, but because of a series of miscalculations that undermined their legendary status. Their time in the Federation began with a bang and ended with a whimper, a result of a creative team that seemed to fundamentally misunderstand the nature of their genius. The Rocco gimmick was a perfect example of this. It was a failure of imagination, a misguided attempt to force an act into a mold that they were never meant to fit. The Legion of Doom was a masterpiece of their own making, a product of their passion and their commitment to their craft. They didn't need a puppet, and their legacy, despite the Rocco debacle, endures. Their power, their presence, and their influence on the wrestling world are undeniable. Hawk and Animal are now gone, claimed by health struggles, but the force they brought to the ring will never be forgotten. The Legion of Doom lives on. May they both rest in eternal peace.